Today, I have Philip here with me once again as we begin our chat for Monster Read Along. And we are joined by our friend Patrick Leo. Do you have yours
I
up too?
yeah, I don't have one.
Yes, so we have Patrick here with us as well, you've read Monster before, eh?
Yeah, a long time ago. Even I just did a second read of this, the first two volumes, the first bind-up, and I forgot so many things already. So just consider me a new reader to this one.
Do you remember very many of the reveals and twists?
No,
Okay,
I only remember the name Johan, and then that's
okay,
it, and Doctor Tenma. That's it.
okay. And Philip, what about you? How much knowledge did you have of this going in?
Zero,
Yeah.
except what's interesting is it opens in Germany about the same time period that I lived in Germany as a
Oh, no
kid.
kidding.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
I mean, I was there, the last time I was there was in 85, and I think it opens in 86. So it was close.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's like, yeah, I know this place. Yeah.
you're right, right. It felt familiar. Does it all look like you remember it?
More or less. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Spent a lot of time in the hospital while you were there?
I did not make it to that hospital, fortunately.
It seems like the ownership, the way it's run, is less than ideal for a patient.
Yeah, pretty brutal
Yeah.
capitalist kind of mentality there. That
Not ideal. Not
yeah.
ideal. I too went in knowing absolutely nothing. I knew that it was a thriller and that it was a mystery. So that's all. I didn't even know the main character's name. I still have many questions about what we're doing. Like, are we doing supernatural with this or are we not? But anyway, we'll get into all of that. But yeah, so it opened up with some moral quandaries, which Philip, we love discussing.
Absolutely, we do
So
indeed.
I wanna pass it off to you right off because we had a lot of the politics, playing the politics game, which I know is something that you have some feelings on already. So how did you feel about that opening, him having to switch patients and then feeling that burden on himself?
Yeah, I appreciate that it's framed as a very individual decision. It's like this person who's got great intentions, wants to be a great doctor, has ambitions too. So he has conflict because in order to serve those ambitions, he has to do something that might be morally questionable and might conflict with his desire as a doctor to save lives. So it's put quite starkly as in a couple different moments. One is Ava, his girlfriend, fiance, says some people are more important than others.
Yes.
And then the director or whatever the title, Ava's father, right? Simply, he's a very ambitious individual, and he's sort of almost like a symbol of the system, the way the system favors a less compassionate way
Business.
business. Yeah, and it's kind of you know capitalism is great. It has brought tons of prosperity, but there are some realms where I believe personally that there is a human concern,
Sure.
and that includes saving lives and healthcare and education even. So it's a shame to see this mentality invade a realm where it should be about saving lives, and instead it's about how can we advance ourselves individually first. It's me, number one, and then the hospital as a whole. That's what the excuse is usually given, is, oh, what we have to do, it's right for the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
It's really what's right for me as the guy in charge of the hospital. How can I advance myself? Because I'm looking at that other position over there, and I don't really care what happens at the hospital. Mm-hmm. It's this selfishness and Tenma is caught in this because he is ambitious, but he's also humane.
Yeah.
And it's his conflict that makes him interesting right from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too the conflict of like it is a reasonable conflict that you might have to face of, okay, if this person dies, then that affects a huge number of people, right? And if this person dies, maybe it's a smaller number of people, right? So like that question does get asked in those circumstances, I'm sure. I personally land in the same area that Tenma ended up landing in, which is that all life is equally valuable. But in the moment, those kinds of decisions are hard to make. Patrick, how are you feeling about all the beginning?
Definitely feel as a narration wise, I think it is pretty well done in my opinion. For an introduction, I think it is pretty damn good. And also, Dr. Tenma was instantly likable for me because, as Philip said, he has ambition, but at the same time, he has to do some questionable things in order to achieve them. But at its core, because he's a doctor, he is human. He's very kind. Yeah, he wants to save as many lives as possible. And I think the kind of questions that is raised here is something that we can always ask, even to this day, whether a doctor choose another person over the other or not. I mean, we cannot. We have to be realistic, and I think sometimes the situation will have to happen.
Oh yeah.
In some hospitals, and yeah, that's a shame. And I think there is no really right answer to this except that to do our best, like Tenma did. Except that the result of what he did may not be optimal right now.
Yeah, it affected. I mean, I think that he did everything right. And I'm surprised because he came off as such a people pleaser in the beginning. I fully expected him to just do when he got the second conflict, and the kid had the kid, and that was the mayor. The kid and the mayor. What was the second conflict? Yeah, the first one was an opera singer and a common man, and the second one was
the Turkish laborer, which is important too because Turkish immigrants in Germany were brought into the country as a source of labor, but were also, in many ways, many people would perceive that they were treated very poorly.
Good context. Thank you.
So that's important to understand the history of the Turkish immigrant population in Germany. It's not always a very happy history. So they're a minority. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he hits the second conflict, and I expected him to just go with it because this is like a snap decision. This is not something that he can mull over. And because he comes off as a people pleaser in the beginning, I just thought that he was going to make the wrong decision, and that would be his defining moment. But thankfully, the director was very upfront about his motivations. Money, baby. I don't care about you. I care about money. So he was able to cut through that and make that choice. So I feel like he made every choice as best he could, and still his life was devastatingly negatively affected. Philip, you don't agree with me. Why don't you think that he made every right choice?
Well, I think his first decision, I actually agree about the second decision. And I do think that what motivated him in part was guilt over the first decision to obey the director, Heinemann, I think, or whatever his name was, to obey the orders and for the sake of his own ambition. And it resulted in this horrible confrontation where the wife of the Turkish laborer said, why did you basically killed my husband by neglecting him in order to do this more high profile thing.
I don't agree with you.
I actually think that he made the wrong choice to obey orders in that situation.
But he didn't know. He didn't know. He was doing a thing, and then a head popped in and said, hey, go to that, change of plans, go to that operating room. He didn't know about the politics being played. He didn't know about who was in what room. He was just in the moment following orders.
Yeah, I think he questioned a little bit in that moment and didn't follow through with his instinct. I mean, he knew the atmosphere that he was in. I think he's not stupid. Like the other doctor points out frequently, what's his name? The one, it's not Baker. What is the one who always keeps...
Oh, Brecker or Breyer?
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
Messing up.
He's the one who's kind of a loser himself, and he's sort of chummy with Tenma. And he points out, you're being used, right? This is all political, right? And I don't think Tenma is entirely naive. I think he understands why things are going the way. And it's that confrontation with that Turkish woman that brings out his inner kind of, well, geez, what am I doing here? Why am I just obeying orders and leaving this patient to die?
Interesting.
I think that's how I read it anyway.
Patrick, be our tiebreaker, because I'm still team. I think he didn't know, and that was like a slap in the face. I think that was like the defining moment of, oh, I'm I'm being manipulated by a system that isn't after the patient's care. And that was what that moment was for him, not I made the wrong call. Because I don't think he had much control over that call. Patrick, be our tiebreaker.
I definitely agree more with Murphy here. But this one, the way I read it, it's really felt like Tenma didn't know that what's going on here. He just followed orders willfully while being ignorant about everything, without knowing anything about the situation, like he's choosing other lives over that. But that's just my perspective. But I agree with Murphy on this one. I think Tenma just didn't know what's going on.
I think it can be read both ways, though, Philip.
Yeah.
Well, I don't doubt either way that there's guilt involved in his decision to say, he's put in the same situation. Again, he says, this time, wait, no, I'm going to do the boy first. And that's the patient I have. I'm going to go with that. He would not have done that if he hadn't had that confrontation with the Turkish woman, I think.
Yeah,
there's definitely guilt involved in his decision to do the right thing, even though it costs him big time.
Yeah, it does cost him big time, more than he ever could have imagined. And I think he's just a very naive person, a very doe-eyed person. Like, we see him in the beginning getting manipulated by his girlfriend to forfeit the paper that he wrote, putting his name on it. We see, go ahead. Thank you.
Coffee. There you go.
Coffee.
Hey, coffee. Where's my coffee?
Yeah, so rude, right? Why wouldn't he bring something everywhere? And then we see, to me, it read like he was getting a series of wake-up calls of like, okay, my girlfriend isn't legitimately in love with me. This system is not for the people like I thought it was. The people that are ahead of me are not in any way kind-hearted. And so for him, it was like, okay, line in the sand, I'm setting myself against these things, which made him a really likable protagonist, because usually you see people kind of waffling about for a while when they're faced with these life changes like this. And he didn't. He was assured of what he wanted to do.
How much do you think he was deluding himself before that moment, though? I guess I agree he's naive. That's true. But we're really good at fooling ourselves, too, when we want to believe a certain narrative. And so his ambition maybe was blinding him to the fact that he was making political choices, and that this was costing certain people at the, he was taking care of some people at the expense of others. So
Yeah, I think there was a willful ignorance to that as well. Probably a combination of both. It also raises questions, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but since we're on the topic of these moral quandaries, we had to also face he made a choice of which life he wanted to save. He made it for all the right reasons. He felt like this is where he needed to be. And then that person grew up to be a serial killer, right? So then you have that question, right? Allowing this to Patrick, then you have that question of like, okay, how much do you anchor yourself to the people that you saved? How much responsibility do you really have? And how do you feel about that? Like, where do you land with all that, Patrick? That's such an interesting question to me.
This is so difficult. I mean, thinking about it, with situation like this, I think we can really put the blame, even though it's done for the right motivation, we can really put the blame on Tenma. Because without him saving Johan, this won't happen. All this serial killing won't happen. But at the same time, he cannot know about it, right? He couldn't know. He just made the decision in the blink of an eye, because of all the guilt that pushed him to do it, like the one that happened before Johan. So I don't know. I don't have the right answer for this one. I do think if I was the family of the victim, I would instantly blame Tenma.
His sister does at one point.
Initially, Nina or Anna, or whatever her name is.
We don't even know Johan's real name.
Because the family of from Eastern Germany that defected, they weren't the real. I don't think they were the real parents. This wasn't the first time Johan had done his thing.
But you would think that would be in a report. You would think somebody would have been like the adopted parents or the foster parents, but that's what a mystery does. It withholds information from you. Yeah, I'm with you, Patrick. I think that you can't anchor yourself. Like, your job is to save lives. You can't
Yeah.
anchor yourself to those lives. That is 100% up to the individual on what they do with their life.
Right.
But I also sympathize with him because I can imagine this question would come up. If you're in that position of realizing that you chose to save the life of someone who turned out to be a serial killer,
Exactly.
that has to come up in your mind of like, oh no, where does my fault lie here? And the answer, I think, is it doesn't. But that question has to come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I think it's not. Tenma does the right thing in that moment,
Yeah.
and he shouldn't be blamed. And even, I'm going to call her Nina because that's what she
Yeah,
knows
let's do that.
herself as, I guess. But
You gotta come up with a uniform, what we
Yeah.
call it.
She realizes it too. I mean, she leaves the note. This is way
Yes.
further down the line, but she leaves the note and says,
And food that
And
I
food.
thought was poisoned.
I actually had the same thought.
When he took a bite, I was like, don't do it.
Oh my God! How could you guys think that?
Because it's a murder mystery and everyone's dying every time they eat.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So speaking of that, let's talk about the candies. Let's backtrack, get back to the plot. I'm sure plenty of people are like, stop philosophizing, give me the plot. So back to the plot. After he saves the little boy's life, we then have this situation. Yeah, Patrick, get your focus. I'm just kidding. It's fine. I see you like messing with it.
Wait, I thought he was dancing.
Interpretive dance.
I got it back.
Patrick, you have some music in the background there?
Yeah, he's just dancing along while we're talking. So after he saved the little boy's life, these daggum sweets that are about to drive me mad. The doctors eat them and they die.
Yeah.
Hit me with your initial reactions.
I was shocked. Yeah, even the first time I read through it, I was shocked, and the second time because I completely forgot about everything. I only remember that the kid that he saved will turn out evil. That's the only part that I remember about the monster. So seeing all these people died again instantly actually surprised me again.
Did it? Yeah. And Philip?
Yeah, I immediately started thinking, well, wait, how would that work? How did Johan, if it's Johan, know that these greedy doctors would eat the candy?
That's where I was, Philip. This is gonna be my villain origin story. I'm losing my mind over this.
Yeah, so I mean, that's where you mentioned the possibility of supernatural earlier, and I kind of wonder because both Johan and Anna or Nina or whatever, they seem to have some. They're definitely above average abilities in many respects.
Yeah, there's something going on.
Like she's really cool at Aikido or wherever it is, and then she's got the memory issue and stuff, and so there's something with these two that's not normal, obviously, but is it supernatural? And it's not clear at this point at all. But
the memory issue is a non-issue for me because she's experienced some severe trauma, so. Her mind blocking that off, that's not really a flag.
That's explainable, yeah.
But the candy thing, dude, because someone outside of the hospital sent both the kids a load of gifts, right? And then later, when Tenma is speaking with Johan older, and Johan says, "I heard you say you wanted them dead. I made it happen," and I'm just like. So you, as a child who's comatose, and yes, there are hints that maybe he woke up a little bit earlier than they realized. I don't know how medically sound that is. I feel like maybe they could have monitored that, but I don't know. Whatever. I don't care. I'm not a doctor. So, so the kid woke up, heard him say, "I want those people dead," and was like, "Why, yes, I happen to have these poison candies that someone outside of the hospital sent me. Allow me to mind power these doctors into picking the exact right bag and killing themselves with it." Like, what? That doesn't logically make sense. So I'm waiting for an explanation. And Mr.
Naoki Urasawa.
What? Urasawa?
What you just said.
Urasawa, you better give me a good explanation for this one because it doesn't make sense to me. And I will spiral over this.
So the one thing that I can think of is this kid is really, really smart.
Yeah,
And
that is
it's
true.
Tenma who says, "Oh, this certain they figure out what the poison was."
Mhm,
And
mhm,
Tenma's, "Oh, that's a muscle relaxant. Sounds like something they would have in a hospital."
mhm.
Mm.
So the kid who's really smart gets the whatever it's called, the
Right. He
like
gets out of bed,
begins with
gets
an N,
it.
I think.
He
Gets out
takes
of
it.
bed, gets it, puts it in the candy, and puts the candy out. But how does he know these three doctors are going to be the ones?
How does he know those 3 doctors are going to be the ones? Because the implication is that they have not visited this kid before this moment, or if they have, they don't do it very often. How did he know that they were going to pick that exact bag? What if they don't like that kind of candy? I don't understand.
Yeah.
You two sound like detective. You know?
You know what, Patrick? Yeah, let's talk about the detective next, Mr. Typewriter. How do you feel
Yeah.
about him?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Although I do think did computer exist already back then? Because it was in the 1980s, right? The
Did
first time
computers exist?
we met that guy.
I think even if they already existed, a typewriter still would have been commonplace at this point.
Yeah, yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was a typewriter in the 80s, Patrick. So
I
Oh, yeah,
used a typewriter as a kid.
I never used a typewriter.
I mean, I used it for fun that I got at a junk sale, so it's
Oh.
purely anecdotal.
I'm not sure that counts. Yeah.
No.
Patrick, do you like Lunga? I think his name is Lunga.
At this moment, I still feel a bit indifferent about him. I think he's just there for the story, but I do not consider him like a favorite character. I mean, if he doesn't appear, I wouldn't care. At this moment, okay, at this moment, he will. I think he will play a bigger role later.
Oh yeah, he's targeting Edma, so
Yeah.
it seems like he's gonna ruin his life.
Yeah.
I mean, the law. He's the reason Tenma turns from this well-shaven kind of baby-faced guy to this
Yeah.
grunge dude, right? Because he's going to be on the run now, right? So that's because Lunga is on his trail and he's suspect number one. So he's going to be an antagonist, I would imagine, for most or all of the series.
Mhm.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Philip, this story went in a really different direction than I expected. We spent so much time in the hospital, and then the fact that we just kind of like all of a sudden turn into this chase of trying to find these kids and potentially supernatural elements, like it went way where I wasn't expecting it to go.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I thought it was going to be another philosophical story with all the moral quandaries posted at the beginning, and it probably still will be to some extent. But yeah, it's gone in an interesting direction.
It does something different, which is most of the time with mystery, you think of it as a whodunit, and you're trying to figure out who done it the whole time.
Yeah.
Here, from the beginning, we know who done it, and what we're trying to figure out is why and how. So it's a little bit different in that sense. It's a bit of a thriller, I suppose, more than a mystery, I guess. Though there are mysteries,
which is good for me.
Yes, good, yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that initial reveal when we first see that Johan is the one who's been doing this. Did y'all call it? I know, Patrick, you said that you remembered a couple things. Is that one of the things you said you remembered?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Did you call it the first time? Did you see it coming?
I kind of had a feeling that it would be Johan, but that's it. Just a feeling, and it's proven. I mean, to be fair, back when I was going to start reading Monster for the first time, back then I kept on hearing that Johan is one of the most like memorable villains,
really?
something like that. So yeah, it's because of that I just had that expectation going into it.
Philip,
how about you two?
Yeah, so I think the back blurb is a little misleading in a sense because it says that it's kind of hard to see. But it says that his oath to save people's lives will result in the birth of an abomination. But Johan was already a killer before he did the surgery to save his life. So it's not like the bullet to the head is the thing that made him this monster. His sister shot him in the head because he had killed their presumably adoptive parents. Right. So he was already this monster before. Now Tenma saved his life, not knowing that he was this whatever, serial killing 10-year-old or 11-year-old, whatever he was. So in that sense, he's not to blame for unleashing this on the world, although he's taking responsibility for it, isn't he? So.
That has my head spinning because I didn't read the blurb. So if his decision, if that's an honest blurb, which blurbs aren't always honest, then if his decision births something, that has me looking at Nina a little different.
Maybe.
Because his decision to save Johan could birth something in Nina to get back at him, or to, I don't know. That could be interesting, especially since Johan is after Nina right now. We had the emails, we had that meetup that we should probably talk about that happened. So I guess we'll just go ahead and talk about that now. But yeah, so he's on the run. He's trying to find Nina. He's trying to find Johan and undo what, you know, he feels responsible for. And Nina's getting these emails, and oh, sweet Nina, she's wonderful. I do love her, but those emails were not romantic. That was
it's not. It's creepy.
very scary.
I'm gonna bury you in flowers.
Yeah. And then when you go to Peter and say, "Hey, I got your emails," and he's like, "No," and she's like, "Oh, nobody else has my email. Please be secret." Yeah. But anyway, so Johan has Herbie held up by the guy that's pretending to be a gardener, and then goes in. That scene with her parents and the reporter was horrifying. That was a big blow. But anyway, he's after her, right? So I feel like obviously her storyline isn't done. What do you guys think? Do you have any theories about what he wants to do with her, what his plan is with all of this? Because he looked her in the eyes when she pointed a gun at him, laughed, and said, "After you shoot me, throw the gun out the window." He doesn't seem to want her dead. He also doesn't seem to be too worried about dying.
Yeah.
What you got?
Patrick, you want to take a stab? Or shot, rather? Sorry.
You know, I think Johan actually, remember that in the hospital, we saw him crying, right? After he supposedly met the twins, Nina,
his sister.
Yeah, Nina. And I think deep down, there is indeed a genuine feeling that he indeed cared about Nina. Yeah, I think. But at the same time, he did told Nina to shot him to the head, and that's something that I'm still confused about. I still don't know what's the purpose behind that.
Did he tell her to shoot him, or did he say, "After you shoot me, throw the gun"?
I think he did tell her to shoot him, right?
Okay.
I could be wrong, Riz, because I'm reading the Indonesian translation. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so it could be different.
Yeah. Well, even just in my own Discord, I'm reading it with a bunch of people, and even in my own Discord, we had different translations for a couple of things.
Okay.
So there might be some confusion as we go through this. I'm trying to find it really quick if I can. Philip, do you remember what?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, and I can't with 100% certainty say which it is. But while we're looking, I will say that I'm sad about Maurer, because the poor guy just resolved to quit smoking, and then he gets
He went from coming off a little bit sleazy to being very likable very quickly.
Yeah.
And then we lost him.
And then boom. Oh, man. Jeez. Poor guy. So, yeah, but I liked his little role there. Yeah, I initially thought that she picked up the gun trying to stop him from being
that's what I thought too.
What he was, and it seemed like the only way. And then he saw her resolving to do this and said, "All right, yeah, after you shoot me in the head, throw the gun out the window." Like that's how I read it. That's how I remember it. But again, like you, Patrick, I could be misremembering that. But that's how I read it. So she at some point resolved, "No, I'm going to stop this."
I've got it. My brother shot them. It was him. He was the one who killed them all. So I picked up the gun and I aimed it at my brother. He looked at me and laughed and said, "After you shoot me, throw the gun out the window. Get me right in the head." So,
okay.
Right. So I think it was of her own will that she was going to kill him and stop him. And he looked at her and laughed and said, "Go for it. Make sure you get me in the head, and then don't incriminate yourself." So this is another, I have many, okay, let me launch into a theory. I have many reasons why I think that we're going supernatural.
Okay.
One reason is that there have been several mentions that kind of indicate that we're doing something like the devil did it, which I really hope is not where we're going. But we have her going to therapy at one point, and the therapist, she said there was something when she saw after she went on that date and she passed out, and because she saw Johan in the distance. And the therapist was like, so it wasn't something on the date that freaked you out. It was something that you saw off in the distance. And she said, yeah, I saw a guy that seemed pure evil. And then the therapist kind of disengaged. And he's like, I'm a therapist, not a philosopher. And she said, yeah, I don't go to church either. Okay, yeah, that scene. So it could be a translation thing. But to me, her responding with, I don't go to church either, felt really weird, like a weird response to that. Almost like the author was intentionally aligning this with like church and religious and like something faith thing. And then very shortly after that, the guy that you just mentioned that gave up his smokes, Maurer, was talking about Johan, and he said that he was like a devil. Then we have scenes like this where he doesn't seem to fear death. He's like, yeah, shoot me, get me right in the head. Like he knows he's coming back. And then we also have at the very beginning of the manga, we get like the opening scene, and then it cuts to this passage from Revelation.
Yes.
So that right off indicates that we're dealing with something that's like maybe possession or like a reincarnation of something evil or something like that. Which personally, I'm not really. That's not really the direction that I would choose for this to go in. That doesn't sound very interesting to me. I'm not writing it off if we do end up going that way. You know, Full Metal Alchemist was a phenomenal manga. So I'm not saying no to it. I'm just saying, you know, it doesn't sound interesting to me. The Johan series. Sorry, I just monologued for a real.
If Johan is something supernatural or demon related or whatever, then so is Nina. They're twins, which, you know, might explain why she's so formidable. I mean, she's just beating the pants off of everybody, and she's a relative newbie, I think, too, at Aikido. So that seems a little odd to me. I don't know.
That's a good point, actually, Philip. I didn't suspect Nina at all. But you could be onto something. They could both be some sort of reincarnation, or since they weren't biologically the children of that first family, then they could come from anywhere. I mean,
they could be doing this for centuries, even.
Right, or they could be experiments in a lab that went wrong. Like it could be
enough. You guys are thinking way too much on this.
You're supposed to theorize.
Okay. Okay. My theory is that there is also the possibility.
Let me make something up real quick. What's your theory?
I also think there is the possibility that Nina might not remember things correctly, because remember that she has blocked out her memory on this event. So the stuff that she said to Tenma could just be, wrong. Maybe.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a good point. She could be an unreliable source.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, I completely forgot about this. Oh my god.
I mean, Patrick, are you the type of reader that when you read a mystery, you just like go with the flow, let the mystery take you where it takes you? Yeah. I'm such a theorizer. I'm not a good theorizer, but I'm always trying to figure it out before the story tells me.
I mean, if there's a theory that came to my mind, I would think about it. But usually, I don't like purposefully theorize about it when I'm reading a mystery.
Yeah, fair enough. Philip?
Oh, I'm always trying to figure it out. I mean, I'm looking at every little thing. Oh, that's a clue right there.
Me too. Me too. Even in the beginning, when the first family died and we found out that he had just been granted amnesty, I was like, okay, that's a thing. Keep that in mind. This is political. There's something going on here. And then it ended up going in a totally different direction. But yeah, that's very much me as well. I'm taking notes. I'm trying to like, I'm that meme of the guy with the wall with all the string. Yeah, exactly.
Next time like me, you're going to have strings all over your wall, aren't you?
Behind your back, Philip. On the wall behind your back.
Yes. So I would like to talk about the girlfriend real quick because I think she's amazing.
What?
She had,
Why?
there was a millisecond when I liked her. There was a moment when I liked her.
Really? Which
That's
part? When she was drunk?
When the BKA guy, Lunga, showed up and was trying to get information, and she protected Tenma. I thought, oh, she really loved him.
No, she didn't. There's no indication she ever.
No, and then she gets mad at him again because he rejects her, and then she goes back to Lunga and says, "He's the guy with the tie. You know, I get that tie to him."
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, she goes to him and she's like, "Hey, just so you know, I'm blackmailing you now."
So
Yeah, I love it. Patrick, what do you love her?
No. I hate that kind of person so much.
I think that's not the type of person I would ever want to meet in real life, but to read about, man, that's a fun character to read about. Like that just I roll, Patrick.
No. It's really not. This is the kind of character that if I read this in a novel, it would piss me off so badly.
Oh, that's so funny. I love a good villain. And she's she's a good, not pure evil, but pure antagonistic, like just nasty, self-serving
narcissist.
Narcissist. And since
Yeah.
in small doses, I'm like, I love it. But like just as a nice little speed bump in the road, not as somebody that I would want to follow wholeheartedly. She's it's a lot of flavor to the story. It's funny.
And to be fair to her, it appears that she was not raised with the best role model. You know, her father is. That's it. I think we should all just start doing this.
This camera always. Look, just blur me, okay?
Blurry Patrick.
Sorry, Philip, go ahead.
I have no idea what I was saying.
Bad role. That's true.
Oh yeah, so her father, Dr. Heinemann, or if I'm remembering that right, is also, you know, he's the difference is he's unattractive, whereas she's attractive.
Right.
But he's this horrible person who simply views the rest of the world. He steals his interns and his doctor's papers and puts his name on them to advance his career. He makes political decisions that cost people's lives in order to advance himself. He's a horrible human being, and that's what she's learned, essentially. Yeah. And she's, you know, you see her having later in the story having become an alcoholic, and there is something sad about her having grown up with this father. The mother's not in the picture, and learned those values presumably from him, and then in a selfish way, I guess she loves Tenma and realizes that at least he actually loved her, whereas all these other relationships she's had have been completely unfulfilling because the men in them have been using her the same way she's been using them. So she's kind of washed up and sad and kind of pathetic, really. So
yeah, pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, I think damn it, I need to learn this author's name so that I can appropriately. Urasawa, thanks. I think Urasawa did an excellent job from the first scene, letting us know exactly who she is. Like her manipulating him in bed and then going on to say, I don't do well under struggle or under whatever the line was. So do well by me. Like it was very clear in that line. I was like, oh, she's not going to stay loyal to you because like life presents hardships. So maybe run now. And then of course, the moment he gets any sort of hardship, she's like, and now I'm with him, the next one that's going to become, you know, the head of surgery. And then she runs back to Tenma as soon as he gets the promotion again. And it's very clear who she is from the beginning. And like I said, I think she's just a fun little speed bump in the story. I like it. But I do want to talk about the ending, like how that all wrapped up with the guy who was teaching him safety, who was teaching him gun. All that. So, okay, Philip, what do you got?
Oh yeah, I mean, one thing that Urasawa is good at so far is these little characters that come in, like Maurer and the mercenary guy who teaches Tenma how to use a gun. And he even gives him a little backstory with the little girl that he adopted after killing her mother in Myanmar, I think it was.
Yeah.
So he gives him, again, immediately, this is a great character with some inbuilt conflict, who has led a life of violence, presumably knows how to use a gun well, is a very formidable soldier. And he has this little girl with him that he, out of some part of him, must feel like he's responsible for, even though the woman had pointed the gun at him and he was, you could argue, self-defense, blah, 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 but he feels some guilt over that. And you see him trying to make some decent decisions with his life. And one of them being, he's not going to give all of the information about Tenma to Lunga, who is investigating him. He's trying to protect him. He's made a connection with this guy because he sees that Tenma is a decent, good, kind-hearted person. And maybe he's not a good, kind-hearted person himself, but he's trying to be. And so maybe Tenma represents something that he wants to be, and so he feels protective of him. And that's a nice thing that I think gets inserted there relatively quickly. So
it's very quick. I think that entire chapter was really amazing, in my opinion, because we instantly know this character, the background, his personality, his motivation, instantly from that one chapter. And the closing of that chapter alone was just emotional. It was so powerful, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree, Patrick. That was one of the most impactful scenes in the whole manga for me, or in the whole bind up. So I love this guy. I love the message that he taught Tenma in that flashback, where he was saying, like, okay, yes, this was a situation of self-defense because I walked into the room, she had a gun aimed at me. If I didn't act, she would have acted. One of us was going to die here, right?
Yeah.
So I pulled the trigger. And the lesson he taught him is, if you're going to wield a gun, be aware that if you use it, there will be fallout. There will be repercussions, and you are responsible for them. So, and that's exactly what he did, where he was like, regardless of whose fault you want to call this, I'm now responsible for this child. And so I took responsibility for the fallout of my actions. And he said it in such like a stark way. Like, he was just like, these are the facts. This isn't an easy situation, which I thought was a really good parallel to what Tenma is dealing with right now, where he was like, I made a choice and now I'm dealing with the fallout. You know, my actions have now affected the world in a lot of ways. So it was a really good parallel, but it was also just a really good message about, like, all right, be aware if you're wielding a gun, what consequences you're going to have to bear. And so I really liked that. But then I also really liked that it showed how Tenma softened her, and how Tenma helped her kind of work through some internal emotions that she was dealing with and learn to smile. And that the way Tenma affected her then affected him, because he saw the change in her, and that made him love Tenma and want to protect Tenma because of how he helped the little girl. And so it was like a chain reaction for him, where he was like, all right, I'm loyal to this guy because of how he helped this girl that I'm responsible for. And then you get to see them as he walks out of the interview and he holds her hand and he cries and then I cry. It was a beautiful ending. It was, and that's one thing that already I'm gonna have to look again. Urasawa. Thank you, Patrick. Urasawa immediately is amazing at characters. The fact that with Tenma, with the girlfriend that we just talked about, with the criminal that we didn't even bring up, the one with the cuckoo clock, where we didn't even talk about him. But with this guy, all throughout this bind up, we have little vignettes of characters that don't get a lot of page time, but get an extraordinary amount of characterization.
Yeah.
So this is like immediately a strong suit for him, that he can right away establish who someone is, what their purpose is in the story, and get us invested in them so quick. Oh, the guy who quit smoking, him as well, so quick. We cared about him dying, even though he got so little page time. That's amazing to me. That's a skill that a lot of authors don't hold. So I'm really excited about that aspect of the story as well.
Did the little girl that the mercenary adopted remind you a little bit of Rindo from Vagabond? That's
I didn't make that connection, but yeah, I could totally.
Little girl, yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
Oh no, just to say they both have seen some trauma, and that's very touching. And there's a relationship with an older male who was an instigator of that kind of trauma,
right? Who she was able to bond with.
Yeah, and there's a very human, very beautiful thing going on there. Yeah,
yeah, that's a good correlation. I like that.
Yeah.
Patrick, overall thoughts on the first bind up? How you feeling?
Definitely loved it. I think usually when I read a manga, this includes a lot of some of my favorites. But when I read a manga, it usually requires a lot of volumes before I felt really invested.
Yes.
But Naoki Urasawa, it doesn't happen with his books. Whether it's this one, Monster, 20th Century Boys, or Pluto, all of them was so easy for me to feel attached to. So yeah, love this one, love the first volume, and I think I look forward to reading the next one very soon.
Philip?
Cool. Yeah, I'm in. I enjoyed the characters, as you said. That's a strength, and I'm curious. There are certain things that I want to figure out at this point, which is good since this is supposed to be some kind of a mystery. so I'm invested. I'm looking forward to finding out some things. What's behind all this? Whether or not you and I, Murphy, are on the right track about this natural business, or if we're just a bit silly. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, that's part of the fun of it, though, is trying to get through all that. So
it makes me more excited too now because I want to find out whether your theory is correct or not.
Our theories will likely change throughout the duration of as we get news and stuff as well. But that's part of the fun, is trying to sort it out, and everybody watching us be wrong and laughing at us. But I'm very invested in it as well. I think that narratively, this is an extremely strong story right off the bat. So even if y'all in the comments, even if I'm right about the supernatural thing and you're like, oh no, she's gonna hate it. If it's executed well, it'll be fun. So it's all good. That's kind of my gut reaction to like, oh man, we're doing this. But it'll be awesome if it's awesome. So I'm super excited. I think that there's a lot of strengths right off the bat. And I'm very, very intrigued. I need more answers. There's a lot of things that I'm like, what are you doing? So I'm kind of like, I'm optimistic, but I'm not 100% like this is going to be amazing until I get a couple more answers and see how some things play out. But very interested, which is a good thing for me with a mystery.
Yep.
Good. Well, thank you both for joining me for this chat. The next one will be on Philip's channel next week. Patrick is going to be in and out a little bit because you have a couple of trips coming up, but it'll either be me and Philip or it'll be all three of us throughout the duration of this. Patrick's still going to read along even when he's not with us. So yeah, I'm excited to continue discussing it with you both.
All right. I am too. This is so wonderful. And I love that we have our buddy Patrick here with us too.
Yes.
It's really glad to join you too. I've been watching your Vinland Saga and also Vagabond chat. It's really fun. And I'm glad I can join. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, links are in the description. So check out both Philip and Patrick if you haven't already. And we will see you next week on Philip's channel for the next Bind Up. Bye.